Hello everyone, and welcome to some more tabletop RPG horror story cringe with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a tale about a dungeon master that has homebrew rules that basically just ruin the game for any caster. A story about a DM that introduces a monster that will make you say, "What was he thinking?" and much more. So, with the preamble out of the way, let's get right into these stories. DM killed my character after baiting me into it. By Reddit user, maybeaduck19. So, I've been playing in this campaign for a few months, and recently, my player character just died. I'll give you a bit of backstory first. Well, I drew up a bard to play in this campaign that was explained to me that would be D&D without any major changes to mechanics, just some minor stuff to explain races in his world. He didn't let me decide on my backstory on my own, and made me part of a faction that has an objective to destroy the monarchs ruling the land. So I went with it, and started to get my character more involved into the storyline, getting stuff for this faction, and doing missions taking intel from one place to another, etc. I was even allowed to create kind of like a subdivision of this faction, that, as an additional objective, wanted to not only overthrow the royal family, but to kill them. We spent a few sessions with me gathering people into the subdivision of the faction, and it seemed like it was finally going great. Though I was having some trouble keeping myself interested in the campaign because of some of the homebrew that the DM imposed on us after like 2 to 3 sessions. He ruled that you could only ever cast spells if you win an opposed intelligence check against the enemies. The thing is, I was playing a bard. So every single time, I would lose the check, and have to basically twiddle my thumbs throughout the whole combat encounter, and hope for one of our allies to be able to win the check, so that I could cast spells, but only with that player's permission. Another rule introduced was that we and the enemies had a bunch of reactions, and apparently, spell slots were not applicable anymore. Basically, a very different premise than D&D without major mechanical changes. We were basically playing an entirely different game. Also, every time I managed to win the intelligence check, with only like nat 20s, when I cast the spells that required a saving throw, every single time without fail, the enemy would pass. So, back to the faction stuff. After a while, we got summoned to the throne room for a meeting with the king, so my character started to prepare himself to try and assassinate the king, because his whole story so far had been revolved around ending his reign. When we got to the throne room, a fight broke out with some different enemies that invaded the castle, and I decided to take my shot at the assassination. As soon as I tried the spell, the king passed the test and used 2 reactions to hit me twice, killing me. No, not downing me. He cut my head off and I wasn't allowed death saves. I just had to roll a new character the following session. I agree with OP here. That's not D&D anymore. That's just some sort of bastardization of it. Needing to make a contested intelligence check just to try and cast a spell in battle is overkill. Then, even if you pass that, the enemy still has a chance to pass the spell DC? That's not only unbalanced as hell, but for a charisma-based caster like a bard, that makes the game damn near impossible. Then to just get rid of death saves altogether when OP's character went down is another BS homebrew that this DM came up with. Now, OP later stated in the comments that the DM is one of his best friends, and that is why he made a new character. But at a point, if you aren't having fun with the game, you shouldn't push yourself to keep playing just for his sake. I would talk to him and tell him that his homebrew BS is ruining the game, and that you don't want to keep playing if it stays that way. Hopefully, he'll listen, but some people are just unable to admit when they may be wrong about stuff, and there is always a chance that he's one of them, in which case, I'd just walk. You can still be friends and not play D&D with each other. Though, that's just my advice. What would you all do in this situation? Let's move on. Confessions from a Reformed That Guy by Reddit user, Biggest Gal. This was a very long time ago. I was a kid still in middle school, and I was very, very immature. I've never talked about this because of the shame I felt hearing parallels in other horror stories, but I thought I would share it because I thought it might be better to put it out there than steep in the shame. Back in 2015, I was invited by some friends to play Dungeons & Dragons 5e. I was interested, and I went to their house where I met the rest of the group and wrote up a character, an elf paladin, and we had this shitpost of an introductory one-shot. It went without incident. My table manners weren't the best, but they didn't interfere with the session at all, until we started having more sessions, that is. Around the time we started playing an actual campaign, Undertale had come out, and I was all over it. I had finished 2 playthroughs and was on my 3rd. What makes this relevant to the story is that when we had sessions, I would bring my laptop to the DM's house and play Undertale at the table with the volume up during the session. And because I didn't understand D&D better, I assumed that because I wasn't actively participating in the game like everyone else, that I got left behind by the party and had to catch up for some reason. This wasn't a ruling the DM made. It was just something that I imposed upon myself because I had a very video gamey perception of how D&D is played at the time. And this weird misunderstanding caused me to get pretty upset at the table and want to play even less than I already was. During one session, we met at another player's house because the DM's parents were having a hard time keeping up with 7 to 8 kids in their house on a week-to-week basis, which is understandable. I got on a video call with my then girlfriend at the time during the session and literally got up from the table to go talk to her. And then she and I just start actively disrupting the session, yelling things like, "Cast magic missile in the darkness," even if there was nobody with either spell. Nor was there any magical darkness present. Again, I think this was because I was approaching D&D like a video game, and I'm autistic, which definitely didn't help me see the social ramifications of my behavior. I eventually fell out of the group after an incident while we were playing Smash 4. I used an amiibo instead of fighting myself, and it caused seconds of input lag, and everyone was super mad at me for it. I still talked to the DM and his brother, as they were the friends who invited me and were generally chill with me and my antics. But now, 7 years later, we've drifted apart. If either of them see this, I want them to know that I'm sorry. I'd love to get back in touch and play again one day, especially now that I've had plenty of time to grow as a person and a player. Well, it does sound like OP's actions were pretty disruptive for those games. Though it does make me wonder why the DM and the other players didn't say anything at the time. At least OP realizes now how bad the stuff they were doing at the time was, and has since changed. Though, don't feel too bad. Most of us have done things when we were kids that make us cringe when looking back. I'll tell you this much, I'm certainly glad that social media wasn't a thing when I was a kid. Let's move on. But before we do, Simba would like to show off his stealth skills. I think he's doing a great job. Don't you? But with that impressive feat done, let's get into the following story. How to gracefully leave my D&D group after DM did something I found offensive. By Reddit user, EmotionalDurian1680. This year, I joined a public D&D group. Even though I'm a DM myself, and I do have other tables to play at, I was excited to join this one because all the tables are interconnected, and I wanted to make new friends. I have had bad experiences joining public hobby spaces, but I was optimistic to give it another try. My bad experiences were guys acting weird and creepy to me, even grown men when I was just a teenager. Though, thankfully, my big brothers always looked out for me and always made sure I had a safe space to explore these hobbies. I was clear in Session 0 about what my boundaries are. My character is not a romanceable character, and I had bad experiences with inappropriate content when playing in public. Everything seemed fine until last night. I was a huge fan of the DM's high danger level, no death saves, brutal fights, but I compensated by making my warlock sturdy. Sometimes I felt a little targeted because he had a hard time killing my character, but I saw it as a fun challenge, and it made sense for him to be harder with me since I was by far the most experienced at the table. However, last session, I feel he crossed a line. Our enemy that fight was a dick riding a dick. Yo, what the fuck? I immediately felt uncomfortable, but I played along, planning to talk to him about it afterwards. He had us roll a survival check, and my character failed, and he said that my character took 69 damage. My character's total damage is 78. He did have an NPC heal me for 9, but I had her retreat to her genie's bottle and used a ton of hit dice to get back to full health. After a little bit of dungeon exploring, the dick monster was back, and of course, we had to fight it. It had a special spooge attack. Jesus Christ! Again, I did my best to play along, having my hex on it affect charisma, specifically performance. The conversation after the game continued to be crude, so I left after. I do want to say that I understand that the monster was meant to be funny, and I think if I was playing at a table of close friends with potty humor, it would have been okay. But honestly, as a DM, I would not ever put something like that on the table, especially if a player had said during session 0 that they had bad experiences in the past. I decided on the way home that I'm going to quit this group. It honestly took a lot of fun out of it, and I don't want to spend energy trying to make it work. So what do I say to this DM to quit in a graceful way? I already decided that I was going to let these players keep using my D&D Beyond account until their campaign is over. I want to let him know that it wasn't okay, but without putting him on blast. I think it was just an oversight for him. Another player has to leave because of knee surgery, and I know my leaving is going to leave the group in a bit of a lurch player-wise. But that experience really did ruin the campaign for me. And you have to pay a $5 entry fee for every session. What would you all do? Well, that was certainly one of the stranger reads I've done in recent memory. If you are asking my opinion, if OP is already dead set on leaving the campaign, talk to the DM in private and let him know your reasoning. I wouldn't try to sugarcoat anything either, just straight up lay out the truth like you did in the post. Tell him that it took you out of the game, that it was a line that was too far to cross, especially since you stated as much in the session 0, and that you would prefer to just focus on the other games that you DM and play in. It does suck, because it sounds like OP was enjoying the campaign otherwise, but if you don't want to play anymore after that, then don't. Though, what would you guys suggest in this case? On to the next one. And as it is Friday, it's time to cap things off with this week's glory story. How My Player Invented Rocket Jumping by Reddit user Lumboman. I do see myself as a pretty lenient DM. If anything, I prioritize fun and stupidity over anything and everything, whether it be the laws of physics to even the most basic rules of the game. I love the creativity my players have. I've seen them pull some of the dumbest, but also most genius plans ever, like breaching through walls with cannons to attack Her Majesty's armies, or to gaslight mercenaries to abandon the royal army and join the rebels for better working conditions. But recently, our mad kobold artificer had a brilliant idea. Now, for some background, this is very much your stereotypical artificer, except instead of being fueled by pure chaos and their madman ambitions, this artificer is fueled by Captain Morgan and Jägermeister. And, in a regular drunken state, they managed to get their leg turned into nothing but a meat stump by having their leg blown off in a freak gunpowder storage accident. After that, the most logical solution would of course be to nurture the wound and remove any shrapnel. But he takes a broken swivel cannon and attaches it to his leg. Quite literally just rams the cannon onto their leg and then does some janky artificer stuff while trying not to bleed out. They rolled incredibly lucky and had just invented a new weapon, which he swiftly named leg gun. Though that's only the beginning of his journey to attain flight. He actually did ask me about it, but I sadly told him that it was not possible, even though he could theoretically be propelled by it. He took note of it, and then went back to our standard adventuring. Not so long after, he began using the cannon to dematerialize any poor bastard that got in his way. Grape shot go brr 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 brr. Later on, he meets another kobold artificer. An NPC, which I hastily named Platter, dabbles a lot with weapons, especially the gunpowder kind. To name a few of her inventions, a heavily modified blunderbuss that could fire her specially made 4-pound cannonballs, a pair of knuckle dusters with a revolver cylinder attached to them, and the two most important items, an armband with a small swivel cannon attached to it, basically a dumber version of the ballistics fist from New Vegas, and a large backpack with an inbuilt mechanism which would deploy a pair of large wings that would make you able to glide around in the air. He immediately took note of this and asked if he could buy the backpack and explosive armband. He then puts the armband on his other leg. He has enough firepower to fire himself up in the air like a rocket, and to also deatomize any unlucky bandit he encounters. He sadly hasn't had the opportunity to do this yet, but the thought of this tiny, scaly, drunken mad lad gliding down to the tune of The Ride of the Valkyries, raining hellfire to all of his enemies who happen to be below him, just makes me smile. This is why I love D&D. The amount of pure tomfoolery you can get into is very much unlimited. The sky in this case is no longer the limit, and I can't wait to see what more tricks they have up their sleeves. Well, that definitely is some creative thinking on that player's part. If I was the DM, I would absolutely allow that. Like OP said, I can imagine the abject horror on the enemies' faces when they see this mad drunken kobold being propelled by death cannons. And now, I have the urge to go play some Quake for some reason. But that will do it for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.